They didn't say, "Well, let me go look for a job. If I need money, if I'm gonna survive, I need a job." There were no jobs. They didn't go look for a restaurant to go eat at. They had to create the economy. They had to plant the potatoes, and they didn't have a bank to go to. So the guy who had a stove would say, I'll keep everybody's, we'll make a currency and I'll keep all your valuable stuff in my stove. And then they didn't have like a dentist office. So the dentist was like the person that put the shoes on the horses, right? Somehow horseshoeing is, they assumed if you can do that, you can work on somebody's teeth, right? Just crazy stuff like that. They built where they stood. That's what I'm saying. They developed. There was business development. It was not business management. You don't start with business management. You start with business development. If you want to build a community, you develop the community. So for us, we have hundreds of thousands of kids that go to college and learn business management, but we don't have that same number learning business development. So if you ever wonder why the black community doesn't really have an economic community or its own economic ecosystem, the question you must then ask yourself is, are we even trained to even do that? Do we have that ability to do what Brigham Young and his posse did and go out west and find some land that nobody's using and just build from the ground up? There are families actually out there doing that though. There are black families that own hundreds of acres and they're building little towns, and we don't talk about them as much, but they're out there. They're out there, right? So really, circling back, culture is everything. Culture is everything. That's my point. So if Iverson came from a culture, let's say he came from a culture that was about wealth preservation, like the Trumps. Let's say that one of the Trump kids was the next Allen Iverson, and he went out and made $100 million playing in the NBA. Well, by the time he turned 35, that 100 million would be $2.5 billion, because they would say, "Son, what in the hell? We heard you spent $100,000 at the strip club. You don't. That's not appropriate, son. You want to put your money into crypto and stocks and this real estate deal, so that money will actually grow." So culture, 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 culture. And so what you got to do is, if you want to understand the economics, don't look at what somebody's education is. Look at their culture. Their culture will override the education. And I'm a living example of that. I had a ton of education on finance and investing. I was the number one finance student in college. That's why I got that award. But I didn't invest in college because it wasn't part of my culture. I didn't know nobody in my family who's investing. Investing was something that white people did, and it was something that lived in a book. That's what investing was for me, and I'm ashamed to say it, but that investing didn't really become real for me until I was about 30, 32, 33 years old. I think it was my 401k at Syracuse, which they actually is called a 403b. But I started investing through the 403b, and I began to think and challenge myself and say, "Oh my God, that's kind of crazy. Like here I am, I got a whole PhD in this stuff, but in my mind, because of my culture, 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 I thought that my PhD was designed to do one thing for me, and that was to get me a good job. That was it. That was it." And how many of you grew up in that same mindset? A lot of us do. Go to school, make good grades, and then you can get a good job. He went to the job fair. Everybody wanted him. All the companies wanted him. That's what we like. We like that. We like that idea of being wanted. And then we never really ask, like, well, why do they want you so bad? Well, because they're about to rob your black ass. That's why they want you so bad, because they can extract wealth out of you. Why does Trump have ships on the shores of Venezuela? Well, the president got it right. The president of Venezuela was like, because they want our oil. That's why they kicking it over here. That's why they hanging out with us. When we got something that they want. If they didn't have something that they wanted, Venezuela wouldn't be the country there's a lot of countries they could have their warships next to. Venezuela, well, because they've got a lot of oil, right? And so at the end of the day, when somebody really wants you, instead of being all excited about the fact that they want you should probably ask, like, well, what's in it for you? What are you really getting out of this? Why? And sometimes it's nothing sinister. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I just want to make a deal with you. Here's how we benefit. Here's how you benefit. That's fair. Nothing wrong with that. And, employment does not have to be exploitative. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm saying that in many cases, it actually is, especially when you don't know your worth.